out against lockdowns. Now, these were not fringe scientists. These were people from Harvard, from Yale, from Stanford, and other prominent universities. However, what happened was that they were demonized by their own institutions, by the media, and also by major medical institutions such as the National Institutes of Health. In Canada, doctors had similar problems, but they were kept a little more quiet. I also started noticing that there were a number of scientists, again, highly credentialed people, that had looked at the genome of the virus and suspected that this could have been manipulated in a lab. And again, those people were taken down mercilessly by the Fauci group and also by the mainstream media. So I began to become very curious about why this was what was happening. So I started to dig and dig. And then in 2022, I decided to make a film about the suppression of science during the period of COVID. And in the making of this film, I would like to thank, first of all, the editor and co-director of the film, Marcus Valentin. Marcus was the best collaborator I could have hoped for. Marcus and I were hand in glove, and he was one of those people who was not only a master storyteller, but he could keep a lot of moving parts in his head. As I said, we worked very closely, and he prevented me from making some stupid mistakes. I'd like to thank Robin Waite, our head researcher, who prepared all of the backup research and all of the backup research necessary for our libel lawyers. And our cinematographer is a Shah. And our wonderful composer, Lydia Ainsworth, who gave us a soulful musical score. I would like to thank our Canadian broadcaster streamer, New Tang Dynasty. Joe Wang at New Tang Dynasty came onto this project where at a time when no broadcaster in Canada would touch this film. But Joe Wang, in his former life, was a vaccinologist who happened to have worked on the first SARS vaccine about 20 years ago. And unbeknownst to me, Joe had been writing articles about the corruption in science during the period of COVID. So I had found my man. I'd like to thank the Canada Media Fund and our federal and provincial tax credit agencies. Now, after the screening, our moderator, Rodney Palmer, will lead a discussion with a distinguished panel. And after that, I will come back and join the panel for the audience Q&A. I sincerely hope you enjoy this film. Thank you.
Continues to spread, so does fear.
0.4%. This is making it deadlier than the seasonal flu.
That's still 10 times more than the flu.
And so it's not surprising that the public thought that there was consensus. That's what the media was telling them. But in fact, there wasn't consensus. There were a lot of scientists that were quite unhappy with the direction of policy.
So deadly, so transmissible,
that every single person on the face of the earth needs to like shut down. This is what this virus is so deadly and so every person on the face of the earth needs to like shut down.
Says that learned people were shut down. And from that, we can all realize that it will happen again, and we can take that information to our own selves and judge for ourselves what we believe in the future. I have one note tonight, and that is that Dr. Jennifer Hibbard unfortunately could not join us at the last moment. And I regret that particularly because she was the first one that reached out to me when I volunteered for the Canadian COVID Care Alliance. My name is Rodney Palmer. I was a journalist for 20 years in Canada, and after that I worked in the alternative wellness field, and I attended about 300 medical lectures. And when I was listening to the news and glued to the radio like we all were, I could hear that they weren't getting it right. I could hear that there were lies being told. And I could hear that the scientists were bought and paid for and were selling product. I had my ears tuned for this. So I reached out to the Canadian COVID Care Alliance when I saw their emails, and they spoke like the 300 different doctors that I'd heard at chronic illness lectures, and they were telling the truth. And the first one that got back to me was Dr. Jennifer Hibbard. And she organized the Canadian COVID Care Alliance, a collection of the top scientists in Canada. And she since went on to help organize the World Council for Health, which is an international collection of scientists. And I wish that she could have been here tonight, because that brought me into the Canadian COVID Care Alliance. And I met people like Professor Bruce Pardy. And suddenly I was working with the top legal minds in Canada on the most important question of our time. And then I met Dr. Rujane Killian, who was being suppressed from treating her own patients. The person sitting in tonight for Jennifer is Michael Alexander, who I got to know this week and found out that I actually knew him 15 years ago when we were working on the same project, trying to protect a medical doctor from being railroaded by the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. And the three of them together tonight are like a dream team who are going to be able to talk about what happened from a Canadian perspective. I'd like to welcome them all out on stage right now. Please give them a round of applause. Professor Pardy, Dr. Killian, and Michael Alexander. Thank you all. I get to have a seat. And well, you're welcome to stand as you talk. I get to moderate this, which is a lot of fun for me, because I used to work in journalism a long time ago, and I kind of feel like I'm getting back at it here. And I'm going to ask them each a few questions, and they're going to give some opening comments, and we're going to talk amongst themselves. And then I'm going to ask a few of you if you have any questions, and we're going to come down to the floor and ask questions from the audience if you have any. The filmmaker, Vanessa Dillon, will join us toward the end. I wanted to start with talking with you, Dr. Killian, because when we first started working together with the COVID Care Alliance, I didn't quite understand what was happening with the medical doctors. They were simply doing their job as doctors. And the College of Physicians and Surgeons wanted to know who among us were asking for exemptions to the mask, who among us were asking for exemptions to the vaccines so that they could still move about in society. And so they came to Dr. Killian and said, show us the medical files of all of those patients. And she said, no, that they're medical files, they're not your medical files, I haven't done anything wrong. No patient has complained, there's been no malpractice, there's been no accusation. And they said, we want those files. So she was a good doctor, and she is regulated by that organization. So she said, I'll show you the files, but I'm not showing you their names. So you can judge and assess from the files and the information. Who dare to ask for a mask exemption or a vaccine? And she said no. And they took her license away, and they suspended her right to practice, and they took her job from her. And Dr. Killian, I want to ask you tonight, why did you do it? Why did you stand up like that?
To be honest, I've been asking myself that same question very often for the last little while. Rodney, I think at that stage, when I got to the point, I think you've heard my interview with our town hall meeting with our CEO, where I asked a couple of questions, because they were going to bring in the vaccine mandate in the hospitals. And I asked him questions, Not on the data, not as a scientist, as a clinician. I'm a clinical practitioner. I don't write papers, research papers. I was on the front line. And I asked him a few questions that he wasn't able to answer, but at that point, it all came down to, once again, the theme of this movie that we just watched, the truth. I was not willing to compromise on the truth. When we got to that point, and I mentioned that I resigned from this hospital, that town hall meeting was spread all over the internet, so once again, it was the truth that was being spread, and I think that is what brought me into the sights of the CPSO in all honesty. The exemptions is what has kept me in this battle for the last 3 years. As you mentioned, I was suspended in December of 2021, yeah, long time ago. So I do think it's a record of somebody being temporarily suspended, going on 3 years now, and we have been in a court battle because of this exact case. And the sad part about it is that we have lost every single step of the way so far. The only place that we still have left to go is to the Supreme Court of Canada. And what people need to realize is I was not in court for my own rights or my own freedom or my position as a physician to say, well, you can't look at my charts, because obviously I'm regulated, and I think Bruce can speak a lot, and I think he understands the limitations with a lot of these regulatory bodies, that yes, I signed up to be regulated. I'm self-regulated, that's what they say, but it comes with certain rules. I never broke the rules, that's the irony. I actually just did what was expected of me. So there was a lot of allegations that there was no medical charts, and that's why we're still fighting in court. The part about it is, that's probably the most important part, is that there was 40 of my patients that was willing to go to court with me to intervene, to say, well, we never gave you permission to look at our medical charts. We had no issue with this physician, and they were denied standing every single step of the way so far. And their voices has been silenced as well. And I think it brings it down to, if people understand the bigger battle here, I think sometimes, if we're honest, we really don't know how to win this. And I honestly don't even know if I've got the answer at this moment. I think it's just, when you step into this battle, if you don't step into it as a rebel, you're not trying to prove a point. I'm not an activist. I was a physician that was actually very good at my job, and I enjoyed what I did. My faith and my foundation is probably what has kept me into this fight. I think at that stage, my culture, it irked me that somebody told me to do something that I knew was not right. In all aspects, the science, the ethics, every single layer of it. So I think that is what made me take that public stand. I think it's my conviction of standing up for the truth that has kept me into this fight. Looking back, would I have made the same decision knowing what I know now? Having to file bankruptcy and a lot of other challenges that's come with it? I would hope so, but in all honesty, who knows? But I think what we need to remember is, I stepped into this willingly. There's a lot of people, as the movie once again is, it's COVID collateral. And I think Vanessa did an amazing job trying to explain what the collateral damage is. There is no way for us to tell you what the collateral damage was in the last few years. There's people that have lost so much. The Matthew family. I remember before I stepped away from the hospital, I can recount multiple stories of things that I witnessed as a physician at that stage, 15 years career as an ER physician, of people that were damaged because of policies, not because of a virus that either did or did not escape from a Wuhan lab, but because of policies that was made by people that really didn't care about people. It was all about economy, it was about pushing a narrative and taking away your right to choose. And that is why I'm still in the Canadian court system, is that I was willing to say, well, I can be the protective hedge when the Canadians aren't fighting for themselves at this moment. But I think that's part of the problem. We need to realize Canadians need to wake up and start fighting for themselves. Scott said it. Scott said it perfectly. Why do we do this? Why are we willing to be the outliers and the fringe? It's because we were probably created for that. Maybe it's our personality. At the end of the day, it really doesn't make a difference yet until other people start standing up.
Thank you so much. To wake up to the fact that the media that I had served for so long was intentionally misdirecting us, because a friend of mine who was a journalist said, you've got to see this obscure little closed circuit meeting of the Owen Sound Hospital CAO ordering the doctors and all the staff that they're going to have to get vaccinated, and watch this one doctor, and it was you, and you stood up and said, all of these positive COVID test numbers that we're releasing every day, I don't see us testing patients as they come in the door. And she asked this guy, as he was telling everyone they had to get a vaccine, are we actually testing them as they come through the door for COVID? And he said, no. He said, well, how are we releasing these local numbers in the Grey Bruce area? And he said, well, they do an average out of a couple of hospitals in Toronto, and then they just send those out, and then all the hospitals all over Ontario release those at the same day. And this was the CAO of the hospital explaining, and my mind exploded. I thought, this is going to be the front page of the news tomorrow. And it wasn't, of course. There are so many doctors that have done what you've done. Not many, but there are a handful out there, and they've all been punished very terribly. And many of them, the first call they make is to Michael Alexander, because he has such a long history as a lawyer defending doctors against their regulators. And I know that this includes doctors that you may know of, like Mark Trozzi, like Patrick Phillips, like the doctor that I worked with the Canadian COVID Care Alliance, Dr. Daniel Nagase, out in Alberta. And he's quite famous for having gone into the emergency room of a small Alberta town, found 3 patients dying of COVID, administered ivermectin, and they all walked out, including a 90-year-old patient who went back to their nursing home. So, Michael, I wanted to ask you, because you've been very involved in this ivermectin, part of the story that we saw in the film, that the FDA said, it's for horses and cows, and my former favorite talk show host, Stephen Colbert, said that you ridicule people for it. I know that doctors who have prescribed it have been investigated by the college. I know that doctors who have even talked about it have had their licenses suspended. Pharmacists in Ontario who are compounding ivermectin have been ordered that they may no longer do it. Is this drug illegal in Canada?
Well, thanks for that question, Rodney. No, it's entirely lawful for any doctor in the country to prescribe ivermectin on an off-label basis for the treatment and prevention of COVID-19. It has been during the entire so-called pandemic. So why can't you get it? Okay. So the story of ivermectin, it's not about the science. It's about the politics of control and propaganda. Ivermectin is an anti-parasitic drug used to treat river blindness, and other conditions. It has been on the market and distributed worldwide since 1987. It has an excellent safety profile. Over 5 billion doses have been dispensed throughout the world. The safety profile is equivalent to aspirin. In 2015, the Nobel Committee awarded it a prize, awarded the medicine the prize for being so effective. The WHO referred to it as a wonder drug. It has been approved in Canada for human use since 2018 under the brand name Stramectol. That authorization has not changed. So, what's the problem? Well, here's what happened. In September of 2021, Health Canada posted a security alert on its site. It said, ivermectin is a drug for horses, only for veterinary use. It has never been approved for human use. A lie. Second, there were adverse effects associated with its use in relation to COVID-19 in the southern US. Another lie. They also said it has never been approved anywhere as safe and effective. A third lie. So what happened after that? Well, that's where the colleges stepped in. So here in Ontario, the College of Physicians all of a sudden put a statement on its site that you shouldn't be prescribing questionable drugs for COVID-19. They didn't name ivermectin. So this was not a policy decision. Okay? It was not a statement made by the registrar. It was not presented as a standard of practice. It wasn't a resolution passed by council. It was a little statement on an FAQ section on the college's website. That's all. And using that little statement, they have gone after doctors in this province just for saying maybe you should consider ivermectin as a possible treatment. So the law in Ontario is very clear on this. An administrative body cannot issue a recommendation or a guideline or make a statement and then treat it as if it has the force of law. So what we have now is the College of Physicians enforcing a statement, taking away doctors' licenses, depriving thousands of patients of their doctors simply because they said, oh, by the way, this is an approved medication on the Health Canada website. I've advised all my clients, you can prescribe ivermectin. It's entirely lawful. The province doesn't have jurisdiction over it. The College of Physicians doesn't have jurisdiction over it. Only Health Canada does. So this is very strange, right? It was the authorization directorate that was excluded from this whole process. The authorization directorate is responsible for approving medications at Health Canada. Somehow, the Marketed Health Products Directorate got involved in this game. They are the ones who issued the health safety alert. And they presented it as if the medication had been withdrawn from the Health Canada database. Meanwhile, the authorization directorate did nothing. The medication has been there and available and approved during this entire time. So the interesting story here is, why did the college do it? Why have all the colleges done it? All across the country, and how and why did they do it simultaneously? So I think what happened here in Ontario is the Minister of Health, Christine Elliott, just whispered in the ear of Dr. Nancy Whitmore, the CEO of the CPSO. Look, we can't get away with shutting this thing down. We can't shut down freedom of speech. We can't try to take jurisdiction away from Health Canada. We can't get involved in this whole approval business. But you know what? If you do it, we'll just look the other way. So that's how it happened. The provincial government sanctioned the abuse of authority on the part of the CPSO. And this has happened all across the country. So figuring out how and why that happened, as I say, that's another story, but that's the way it went down.
Thank you. And as a good story, if there was a journalist I would like to read, I listen to CBC radio even for a minute, but when I prepare for these moments, I try not to scream out loud in my car when I'm alone. But yesterday, the former journalist Amanda Pfeffer, now a propagandist for the drug companies, was hosting a show called Ontario Today. And she had on a medical doctor who was associated with the government, where they recommended for an hour that people over 65 go and get their COVID-19 vaccine. This is yesterday. And that Canadians over 6 months old, should also seriously consider it, as though a 6-month-old may be listening and hop in their car and go for it. It was the most ridiculous thing. And this guy also he made the suggestion that humans are moving more into areas where wild animals live, and therefore we should worry more about pandemics. And the journalist, the propagandist Amanda Pfeffer, did not mention that today Health Canada's website lists almost 500 Canadians who have been killed by the vaccine as a direct result, or that the Canadian government a couple of weeks ago added $35 million more for compensation to the injured. There was no mention of this at all, or that even the FBI says it didn't come from an animal. She just let him talk. And for all the people who believe the CBC, or still believe the CBC, only tells the truth, you're in danger if you do that. So Bruce, professor of law at Queen's University, one of the most important legal establishments in our country, the subtitle's for you. Where do we go for truth anymore?
Thanks, Rodney. If
You're free to stand.
Yeah, I'm going to.
If you're old enough, you will remember a time when you got all your news from a very limited number of sources. The CBC perhaps being the first one for a lot of Canadians. And beside the CBC, 3 networks, 2 or 3 national newspapers. And that was basically it. And from that time, there is an assumption that I think is wrong. And it's being illustrated to be wrong because of COVID. And the assumption is this, that those outlets tell the truth. And we expect them to tell the truth. That is a very dangerous assumption. It's wrong. And one of the silver linings of COVID, and there are a few, but one of the silver linings of COVID is the illustration of the fact that that assumption is wrong. And it's just as well to know this. As a citizen, I think we have the wrong default. The default is this, that when you hear something, when you read something in the media, or online for that matter, the default assumption, the default expectation is you are hearing the truth. Turn it on its head. Start from the opposite assumption. Everything you hear is false. Everything you hear is false. So, where do you go for the truth? I'm afraid it's one of the tasks of a free citizen to figure the truth out for yourself. And you have to read enough and listen to enough. You have to hear enough to gather up enough different versions of things so that you can figure that out for yourself. Most people don't want to do that. It's too much work. That's too bad. That's the way it works. Now, consider this, that in the darkness of the COVID experience has also been a miracle. And probably more than one, but the one I have in mind right now is this one. That in spite of the fact that the media was captured, the story was wrong, the professional regulators restricted the ability of doctors to express their opinions, and in so many other ways, that the message, the narrative was controlled. In spite of that, we still know the truth. I mean, that is a miracle. And if you like, COVID has been the first fight of a new era. And the new era goes like this. The mainstream outlets, the mainstream media, the agencies of the administrative state are captured. But there are also other ways to communicate. There are other ways to work. There are other things to read. There are other ways to get together and cooperate. And those are the things that actually, I know it looks like we lost COVID, but I'm not sure the fight is over yet. And the true version of things is continuing to spread, like in this film. And so I don't think this particular version of the struggle is over, and I hope this is an indication about how maybe we have prevailed or maybe will prevail in the future. But keep this in mind, because the powers that be managed to control all of these mainstream outlets, and yet the truth still came out, means that they don't want that to happen again. So there's more trouble coming down the pipe. If I could just add one more item on a different topic. There's a danger in the way that we are considering these questions about what happened during COVID. I mean, you have heard, no doubt, a lot of evidence both tonight and elsewhere about the data and about the scientific opinion about things. And the fact that the information upon which the policies were based was wrong. The lockdowns, the vaccines, the masking didn't work. Here's the danger. If we proceed on the argument that the policies were wrong because they didn't work, that is to suggest that they would have been right if they had worked. And that is not true. So change the facts, just for the thinking through it, for the principle of the thing. Change the facts in your head. Pretend it wasn't COVID. Or pretend COVID was more dangerous than it was. Or pretend that lockdowns might have stopped the spread, or that masking might have worked, or that the vaccines were more effective and safer than they actually were. Change the facts. If you change the facts, does that make the policies okay? And the answer is no. It doesn't matter what the facts are. You cannot lock healthy people down in a free society. You just can't do it. And so my only suggestion would be that let's just be careful about the nature of the argument that we make. There are some things that you shouldn't be able to do. The government should not be able to do, no matter what they claim the consequences might be.
That's the kind of clarity we expect from our top legal professors, so I appreciate that, because it's, you know, you have to think of it in different ways, and we're so easily led down this road. Maybe not the people in this room, maybe some of us were for a while, but there's a hypnotic trance that was done upon us with the broadcasting safe and effective. You're a conspiracy theorist. I have to give a big thank you to Vanessa Dillon for having the courage to make this film. And also, gratitude to the Isabel Bader Theater for screening this film.